finally back. Well, finally back to look at the food intake. So I've already got 3 servings of Chex. I was actually kind of disappointed. I was scanning around the kitchen. I was looking for a box of Golden Grams that used to be floating around in here. Somebody must have finished them off. But, whatever. Simple carb. I know some dudes would pretty much hype up the Chex over any other kind of cereal just because it's rice based rather than like, grain or wheat or whatever. But it's, to me, I'm looking at 120 grams of carbs. There's like 3 grams of fat. Basically, I mean, that's actually not true. I was about to say negligible. No, do not even think about skipping. Like I just looked up the nutrition label, right? Per serving 1 gram of fat in, this little dry Chex. Don't just skip over that. That's the absolute worst mistake you could do. In a bulking context, it's not bad, right? Because of course you'd be eating more food than you're really tracking. But if you're trying to diet down, you've got to be OCD Mr. Monk level. Like any amount of ketchup you get, that's 3 grams of carbs. Any amount of extra oil you put in the pan when you made some eggs, that's 5 grams of fat. When it comes to my dieting, not style, but maybe theory, if you could call it that, calories is the number one factor, right? Because you got to remember, I could eat as perfect food as I want, train as hard as I want for years on end, but if I don't eat enough calories to be in a calorie surplus and actually deposit, well, mass, but primarily muscle onto my frame, I'm not going to get anywhere. I mean, I'll look like a freak, but I'll still be like 220. The only way to actually gain weight is to eat calories in excess of what your body is burning per day. And vice versa is apparently a hard truth. And from some like TikTok freakout videos I see, apparently it's a argued truth. But the only way to lose body fat, again, same thing, but in reverse, you have to eat less calories than your body burns per day, aka a calorie deficit. But apart from that, I'm really trying to get in tons of carbs, my 250 grams of protein ish. I kind of stay around a gram per pound, right? So right now I'm at 250. I'm going to eat 250 grams. If you're a $160, go for a $160. If you do 200 at that weight, or if you did 100 at that weight, I don't think it's going to change anything too much. But good rule of thumb, I'd say gram per pound is where you're at. In terms of fats, it kind of fluctuates. Maybe a fourth of that. So usually my fats are around, well, the bulking gets a little funky. Whatever. I don't really have a specific fat goal I'm aiming for. Bulking days, I'll get up in the 150s. But carbs, I did a whole rant in the drive back from the gym last night about how carbs are totally going to change the way my workouts and pumps feel. So that's what I'm really trying to push. So today, by the end of it, I should be about at 800-ish grams of carbs. So good start with 120, and then I have to add, of course, anytime you're eating anything, at least as often as you can, food scale is going to come in crazy fucking handy. But let's pour on, 3 cups of milk or so. That'd be 720 grams. Perfect. So 3 servings. So that puts me about 170 grams of carbs, 25 grams of protein, and about 25 grams of fat for this whole bowl. So that's however many calories. I'll do the math in the end. I'll add like a counter. Like, it was kind of confusing a little bit last time. So each meal, I'll just write out the macros. And then at the end of the day, I'll write out the total. So I'll just sit here for, 5 minutes, however long it takes me to get this down, and then go do cardio. So this is the pre-cardio meal. Fasted, it's not going to make a fucking difference. And if you're bulking, I think a big breakfast, or at least a moderately sized breakfast, is going to make it a bit easier. Because you got to remember, if you do no breakfast, and like let's say you're going to school, so you don't eat anything until lunch, then that means you've only got from lunch till whenever you go to sleep that's your window to eat. Whereas the dude who had a big ass breakfast, his window is going to be the complete day. So let's just jump to whatever I eat next, the post cardio meal. All right. So apart from any, maybe tweets, apart from any treats or anything that I might have before I go train, this will pretty much be the pre-workout meal. This is one I've kind of been loving. So obviously, I actually go out of my way, cook steak. Usually I'm kind of lazy. I like getting a lot of pre-made food, like a Costco huge 15-pound turkey breast, and just cut chunks off. But the steaks I've been loving. So about a pound of steak, 100 grams of protein. I'd usually just do one of these, like 8 ounces. But since breakfast was kind of lower on protein, I'll just double up. And then a pre-made kind of, I forget the brand, but it's like a 5-serving thing of mashed potatoes. So all this adds up. I already tracked it on my phone. I'm going to have to pull it back up. But 100 grams of protein, 20-ish grams of fat, maybe a little more with all the avocado oil I cooked it in. And then this is going to be about 90 grams of carbs, maybe 14 grams of fat, if I remember right. But, that's about right. So I've never really been a huge proponent of really hitting meals per se. That's one factor which I kind of differentiate in terms of my, let's just call it Rich Piana similarities. Because calories are calories, dude. You can't eat something and have it not count. That's one thing that I think people really kind of have to understand. Like, if you're dieting and you're like, okay, I'm going to have this as a treat. Or even worse, let's say you're not really doing a strict diet. You're just kind of a layman kind of character. And you get what I'm saying. You're not crazy invested. And you're like, yeah, I'll have a salad for lunch. Yeah, I'll just have a couple eggs for breakfast. Right? In your mind, you're like, I did good today. And then it's 8 o'clock. You eat a bunch of pizza that was in the fridge left over, a couple scoops of ice cream. That just 1 hour of snacking before you go to bed will completely offset all the quote unquote good that you did that day. So that's kind of why I sort of took a bit of an anal kind of stance about tracking every kind of calorie. So in a way, this is almost, if you wanted to call it that, you could say meal 3. But after cardio, I stopped in the vending machine at the gym. 2 things of juice, 60 grams of carbs total, followed by 2 big-ass crunch bars, 400 calories total. So that puts me at whatever I'm at now. But I'm sure once I finish this, plus a bunch of water with electrolytes and a couple of amino acids, I'm going to want to take a pretty substantial nap. But afterwards, right, once that nap is taken, and most of the carbs from this mashed potatoes are flowing around my system, plus I'm fully hydrated from finishing off this tub of water, then I'm going to feel super fucking energized for legs. The last thing I'd want to do, and this is why I don't train early in the morning, why I like cardio in the morning, lift later at night, is just because right in the morning, give me one moment. Right in the morning, that's when you're literally in a fasted state from going the whole night without eating. So if that's when you have to train, I guess you just have to deal with it. But I'm going to feel much better, stronger, more endurance, just going to have a better pump and a better workout if I wait for the whole day of, a substantial amount of calories and meals and carbs and water and electrolytes. Because right in the morning, I'm not very hydrated. If anything, I'm dehydrated. You lose a couple of pounds every night. I guess it depends on how big you are, but just by breathing, you're breathing out water. You're going to wake up literally more dehydrated than you were at night. So for me, it just makes sense. Tons of food during the day, fuel up, super hydrated, and then when I actually get into my lift, that's when I'm like, okay, gas tank's at F, gas tank's at full. I'm ready to try to empty that thing as hard as I can, aka, push every set as hard as I can. So that's kind of the plan for tonight. So if this is the last actual meal, then we'll get straight to the car talk. But legs is going to be pretty sick. I'm going to a gym that has a really nice hack squat that I like. It's like cable loaded, but we'll just talk about that when we're there. If I talked about the workout every meal, this would be like a 2-hour video. But this will just fucking disappear in the next 20-ish minutes. I'm sure I'll probably take a nap right here and just sit down on my phone. And when I wake up, I'll be ready to take the pre and get out of here. So I forgot to add, intra-workout was 100 grams of carbs in the hostile bottle. Yeah, I forgot about that. I was doing the blue Gatorade. You know, if you're curious why the cluster dextrin shake isn't back yet, the post-workout instant 50 to 100 grams of carbs plus 20-ish grams of protein, I'm kind of saving it for later. That's I don't want to call it like a last resort, but in a way, it kind of is. I mean, it's a super easy, like pretty much 500 calories, you know, just like that. So I might save that for later. Like once 5,000 or so calories gets a little bit more difficult, or let's say not difficult, but it becomes my new baseline, then adding that big shake post-workout, that'll definitely put me over the edge back into, you know, maintaining growth. So I kind of jumped the gun a little bit while the water was boiling for the ramen. I was already picking at the flank steak that my dad made earlier. So basic premise, 12 ounces of flank steak, 2 packs of chicken ramen. So 100-ish grams of carbs right here, 14 of fat, 75 grams of protein, and about, I think I said 10. I might actually go back in and change it. It's probably more like at least 17 grams of fat. So I'll add that up and put it wherever. But not a lot of crazy treats today, though. When it comes to the actual kinds of foods that I'm eating, for the most part, I do look at it as calories in, calories out, right? How many carbs are in it, how many fats are in it, how much protein is in it. But protein is a little different. I do definitely put a lot of emphasis on making sure that the 250 grams of protein that I'm getting in per day is from a high quality source. You know, you can look this up. It's I forget the exact term, but it's like the protein grading scale. So it's basically 0 to 100, right? 100 obviously being the best, 0 being the worst. And historically, I've kind of had a habit of not really tracking protein from, you know, breads, really just any kind of non-protein source. Like it said, there's like 8 grams of protein in this ramen. From what? From the rice? Look, it's not like it's not nothing. And in a dieting context, you do need to take that into account. Since the proteins are going to count as calories, it is going to count as energy towards your total consumption for the day. But in a bulking context, I want to make sure that every gram of the 250 I'm getting is from, you know, pretty much up in that 90 range. And that's where you're going to see, I haven't looked at it for a while, but it's chicken, milk, steak, fish, eggs. What else am I missing? Yeah, probably other, you know, animal products, animal meats, right? Shit like that. And as you go lower on the scale, you're going to start to see more vegetable proteins, soys, whatnots, wheat proteins, barley proteins, like things along those lines. And that's why I'm not going to really count the protein in bread or the protein in, I'm trying to think what else. I don't know, whatever, right? The protein in that bowl of cereal I have for breakfast, it says 3 grams of protein per serving. Come on, let's be real. You want proteins with a complete amino or acid array, right? Everybody's heard the term complete protein thrown around. So that's, I mean, best case scenario, that's in the meats. So any vegetarians or vegans, even worse, not in terms of ethics or values, but in terms of getting a really complete amino acid array, you are at a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm not going to say it's not good to do your soy proteins or whatever. I'm not saying if you eat tofu, it's going to spike your estrogen. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But I feel like it's a little bit of a, not a roadblock, but a little bit more of a hassle if that's your deal, if that's what you're working around for your diet. So This will put me at 40, 48.87. My math may end up being wrong since I'm going to have to go back and like add up all the individual meals I've already tracked, but just about 4,900 calories so far and only 200 grams of protein. So I think there's still going to be one more meal before bed. Obviously, maybe not so much of a meal, maybe just a couple of treats or something from the fridge. There's I got a bag of Doritos I'm kind of been itching to eat at. Maybe I'll grab that later. But I'm gonna sit here rewatching Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. I'm not gonna go all the way back to Season 1 yet, but you know, probably after one episode, all this is gonna disappear. I'm gonna have a reasonably full belly. Honestly, I'm not really there yet. Like after this whole day of eating, I still feel pretty slim, at least stomach-wise. I do get to a point in my bulks where I can tell I've got a ton of food on my stomach, and it's almost just a little bit extra distended. Maybe first, no. What am I saying? Not first trimester level, but if you get a ton of food in your stomach, it's going to sit there for a minute before it actually gets distributed throughout your whole build. But carbs, proteins, fats, electrolytes from all the salt and the ramen. The only thing that gets me there, this will be my last little point with this meal, when it comes to salt, gets a lot of hate. Gets a lot of hate by the layman's. You know, you don't want to have too much salt in your food. It's going to make you hold water, you know. And to an extent, they're kind of right. Because you got to remember, well, let me just kind of get into it. So let's say you take a dude and he's been eating 2 grams of salt per day, or a gram of salt per day. If that next day he slams 5 grams out of nowhere, or 10 grams out of nowhere, who knows what he's been eating, he might feel like he's holding a little bit of water. Because it's kind of, I mean, if you have a ton of salt all at once, or if you totally cut your salt all at once, it's going to result in a pretty gnarly change in your hydration level. I'm not super informed on like peaking for like a bodybuilding show or water weight cuts if you're like a UFC guy. But that's the kind of stuff that they're messing with. But let's say you're even getting 5 grams of salt a day, or 5 to 10, whatever. As long as you're getting a good amount of fluids in your system and you're actually drinking a lot of water, not just like 2 cups of these a day. I mean like, half gallons, at least a half gallon. You're never going to get wrong with a whole gallon per day. Then don't worry about it. Do not freaking worry about it. If anything, having extra salts and electrolytes is just going to make you more hydrated when you couple that with all the fluids you're intaking. But I'm going to watch my show, play my phone, make this food disappear, and then we can cut to whatever I eat before bed.